what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Alright, hello and welcome to another episode of I Guess I'll Do It with Pat House. Today I'm super excited to have my guests here, Billions, Netflix, Bonfire, HBO, all the good shit today. I'm very excited. This has been a long time in the works. Today I have Dan Soder.
Yeah, man. How you doing,
What's up,
Pat?
dude? I'm doing very good. How are you, man?
I'm doing all right. Hanging
You're
out.
on the road a shit ton, but you're at home right now, right?
Yeah, this is I leave on Sunday and then it's like till the end of the year. So
Where do you go on Sunday?
LA. I go to
Okay.
LA for a couple days and then I'm in LA, San Diego, back in LA, Seattle, Calgary, Edmonton.
Nice. I'm in Seattle right now. I'm actually in
Hell yeah.
Bremerton, but I'm right outside, yeah.
Hell yeah, dude.
I have a bunch of one-nighters here this week. Then I fly home for a couple days. Then I go right back to the West Coast to go to San Fran.
Fuck yeah. Yeah, I'm in
I
San
feel like
Francisco
we always
in
cross
November.
paths. We always cross paths. I feel like every club I'm at, you were just there or are there the week after or 2 weeks after. But that's all of comedy, I guess.
Yeah, that's what comedy is. That's what, like, you see your friend's poster on the wall and you're like, oh, they're there. I'm starting to do more Wednesday shows, which are fun, but those are even more brutal because you're like, oh, they're here tomorrow? You're like, oh,
Yep.
I'm leaving.
And it's
You're
like,
damn.
I haven't seen my friend in 5 years, but you were
Yeah.
just standing in the same spot 3 days ago that I'm
Yeah.
standing in now. It's really, really bizarre.
Yeah, that's why festivals are always so fun because it's like finally a weekend where everyone's together.
Absolutely. So I love starting off by talking about how and where I met my guest.
Yeah.
And I remember the day we met. You and I met at Helium Comedy Club in Philly, but neither one of us were performing. You were there in town. Were you filming a commercial or doing something or doing some VO work? Like you were at the club hanging out, and so was I. And you were wearing a Them Crooked Vultures hoodie, and I was wearing a Foo Fighters hoodie. And we immediately just started talking about Dave Grohl and Josh and dove right into all those bands.
Yeah, I was working. I think that was like 2011.
Dude,
and
it's going back. But I know for a fact you were not performing, and I wasn't either. We were both just there hanging.
Yeah, I was. At that point I hadn't performed in Philadelphia. I had worked in Philly, but I hadn't worked Helium. I had worked other places and done other shows with like, Richie Redding and Big J. I had been like, in Philly a couple times, but that was when I was working for Guinness. And I was like hosting these like shitty shows for Guinness, but it was my first job that wasn't waiting tables.
That's what it was then. Okay.
And I was and Joe DeRosa was there. And Joe DeRosa was like, come hang out. I'm at Helium. And so I was still drinking. So I was like at the bar drinking down in the main bar. And yeah, I remember that.
I'm sure we both were.
Them Crooked Vultures.
Yeah.
And I'm actually seeing Queens of the Stone Age on Saturday.
They were just here on Wednesday, but I couldn't go because I had to fly out here. But I had a bunch of buddies that went, and they said it was the best show they've ever seen.
Really?
And the videos and photos look phenomenal.
Yeah, I've been really excited. I've seen them about, I want to say 15 times. They're my favorite band of all time. So I'm very excited to see. I'm not like doing that. I saw Metallica last week and I looked at the playlist, and so I was kind of excited for that. Queens, I'm not going to do that. They're my favorite.
No. I am. Did you go to night 1 or 2 of Metallica? Because I love how they're doing two separate.
Yeah, I went to night 1 with Pantera.
Nice.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. That was actually real awesome, and we had gotten some decent seats, so it was fun to watch. But I was kind of bummed. I'm not going to lie. I was kind of bummed. Metallica
Night 2 had the better set list, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, they opened with Creeping Death on Friday when I saw them, so I was really hyped to see that. And they closed with Master of Puppets, which was cool.
Yep.
Did King Nothing, that was fun, but it was I don't know if it's the beginning of the tour or what's going on, or if James Hetfield's just old, but it felt. That first time you notice someone getting older, like your mom or like one of your friends, you like see him and you're like, damn, you finally look old.
We're starting to see it now. You're starting to show.
And James Hetfield, I was like, damn, he kind of looks old. He kind of like, his voice wasn't as powerful. It was and that's why I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt and being like, maybe it's the beginning of the tour and he hasn't got into like tour shape, and he'll start
Yeah.
developing it out at the end. But I'm very, very excited to see Queens of the Stone Age.
Oh, dude, they're
I haven't
so great.
seen them live since 2018. So
they're also the loudest band I've ever seen.
yeah, I'm going to be wearing earplugs. I definitely will. I don't want to get tinnitus.
I got to see them open for the Foo Fighters at a small, I want to say 2,000 seat show many, many years ago. And it was, they were 10 times louder than the Foo Fighters.
Yeah, they fucking rock. Everybody that I've ever brought to a Queens of the Stone Age show that doesn't know them or isn't familiar with them, they always leave being like, they fucking rock,
dude.
And you're like, yeah, dude, they bring it every time. I would probably say the two coolest shows I've ever seen at Queens of the Stone Age was in second place. I went to Stockholm, Sweden to see them, and I saw them at an amusement park. It was still daylight, and it was because it was summer, so the sun didn't go down till 11:30.
Later.
But it was fucking awesome. And the best show I ever saw was when they put out Like Clockwork in 2013. I was randomly taking a dump, looking at Twitter, and it was like, we just released 200 tickets to a secret show in Brooklyn, and I got 2 of the tickets.
Oh,
it was at a Masonic temple in Brooklyn and it was maybe 400 to 500 people. And they played a couple songs, and then they played Like Clockwork front to back. And it was that's my favorite album of theirs. So it was like, it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I loved that show. So I'm very, very excited for Saturday.
Moments like that are so much more cooler and so much more meaningful than seeing them at a huge.
Yeah, I've seen them at festivals. I've seen them. I saw them a couple times at the Man's Performing Arts Center in Philly.
That's where they just were.
And I love that. When I saw them there in like 2014 or 2015, they did a really cool thing where they lost like the set list, blew away, or something happened where they didn't have the set list, and Josh Homme was just like, "Oh well, let's just take requests from the audience," and people were yelling stuff out, and he played my favorite song of all time, In the Fade. But he also played like the Fun Machine Took a Shit and Died, which I've rarely heard live. So there's always fun. Like I'm obsessed with them. So it's fun to be like,
that seems like such a dicey situation, because what if, I guess you're going to take requests that you can nail, but like there's also a lot of room for error, which I think is kind of cooler. Like, all right, we'll try this. We might fuck this up, but we're going to try this.
There was a Rolling Stone article about the Masonic Temple show that I saw that came out, a couple weeks later after I saw the show. And apparently what had happened is Josh Homme like walked into the dressing room and told the band, he was like, we're going to play the whole album. And they were like, we haven't played 3 of those songs ever live. And he was like, well, tonight's the night we're going to do it. And he even said during the show, he was like, hey, some of these we're not that tight on, so just get through it, and you're like, but it was awesome.
That's so much cooler.
He's the man. I would say as far as anybody goes creatively, he's always been the person that I look up to.
And there's a handful of videos of YouTube on of him destroying hecklers.
Oh yeah, it's the best. There was one there was
wild.
I'm sure you could probably find it now on Instagram, but one of my old school favorite ones was when they were on tour just 20 years ago for Songs for the Deaf.
My favorite album from them.
That's like, I would say that's their most popular, and like, I think that's like the most iconic album they put out. But because I could argue their self-titled, the first album is their best album, because it's just so fucking like raw. It's right out of the desert. But there's this video, they're playing a House of Blues in Orlando, and there's this moment where this guy, this like drunk kind of business bro, he's in like a button-down light blue button-down shirt, and he comes out and he's like Josh has got his back turned, and he's talking to the drummer, and the guy like goes like this in the middle of the stage, and Josh turns around and sees him and slings his guitar behind his back, and then fucking 300 kicks him in the back into the crowd, and then he grabs the mic and he goes, "This is my fucking stage." And I was like, that rules.
I think I have seen that clip. Yeah, man, there's a hand. There's probably more clips of him destroying hecklers than fucking most comics we know online.
Yeah, he got in trouble for saying, he dropped the F word.
Yeah, I know the exact clip you're talking about.
But then he
Little
came back.
dick F word.
And then he got in trouble. And I remember his response was, he quoted a Bill Hicks joke, and he said, well, you guys are Christians, so forgive me.
Forgive
and I
me.
was like, oh man, that's great.
If there's anything cooler, it's Josh quoting Bill Hicks.
Yeah, and he's the man, and I love that he has Bill Burr open for them sometimes, and he seems like he really gets it. I've been putting off listening to the Neil Brennan episode of Blocks with him, but people I'm Queens of the Stone Age in my life are one of those things where friends will reach out when they see Queens of the Stone Age stuff for me and be like, have you seen this? And a lot of people have reached out and been like, dude, that Blocks episode of Neil Brennan's podcast with Josh Homme is like real fucking good. So I have like 4 interviews I'm excited to watch after I go to the show. I might watch one to hype me.
I was going to say, is that for you? Like, I save really good podcasts for either car rides or plane rides.
Yeah, and being on the road like that, that'll be like, some of those podcasts he's done will be like hotel room fillers.
Yep. Hotel room fillers, just doing shit around the house.
Yeah.
Dude, I haven't seen you in a long time. It's been forever, but your career is awesome, man. I love the Netflix, the stand-ups.
I hated that set, but I appreciate you.
I get that because I don't love my albums anymore. Like, I totally get it. Totally get it.
That was a situation where it left me working. It left a bad taste in my mouth working with Netflix, where and I love Robbie at Netflix. I think he's a really good dude, but I think he was wrong. I think it was like a thing where I really fought because we taped the stand-ups in LA at this theater, and there were 6 of us, so they did 3 and 3, and I taped with Nate Bargatze and Fortune Feimster.
Mm-hmm.
Nate's one of my best friends.
Nate is such a great dude, man.
And that was one of the reasons I wanted to tape that. That's one of the reasons I said yes, because I had released the Comedy Central Hour special probably less than a year before the stand-ups. So I had about a half hour, but I wasn't like crazy about it. And I talked to Robbie, and Robbie was like, this would be a good opportunity for you. No one saw your Comedy Central Hour, which he was right. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll do this. And I went and I did it. And like I said, I taped with Nate and Fortune, and the first show was fucking unbelievable. I went out and I fucked around. I like made fun of the venue. I was like joking around about the whole situation. All the jokes hit in a way that I was like happy about, where I was like, oh man, this is great. The second show, I went third. The first show I went first, and I was like, oh man, I'm gonna go first. This is gonna suck, and it ripped. The second show,
right out the gate, man. Sometimes that energy.
I know. And then the second show, it went Nate, Fortune, me, and Fortune destroyed her. The audience was mostly there to see her. You could really feel that in the room, but Fortune fucking killed. I mean, I was in the back, and I was like getting ready to go because they like did her set, then my set. It was almost a quick turnaround. And
how much time did you do?
I did like 34, and they used 28. But she did about 40 and fucking ripped. I mean, dude, killed to the point where I was standing up and getting going, and they're like, no, that was just an applause break from a joke. And I was like, fuck. And then I went up there, and they were like, we don't care about this guy. They're like, we don't give a shit. And then I had to like walk them down with jokes, and got them by the end. But it was a set where I was like, when I left the venue that night, I was like, well, we got it. The first show, that was it. We got it. And then they came back, and they're like, we're using the second show. And I dug my heels in, and I was like,
what would be their logic on that? Or their reasoning behind that?
They said I made fun of the venue. And I was like, so the fuck what? Does Netflix own the building? Who gives a shit?
Even if they did.
So what? And then Robbie tried to be like, well, you didn't open with personal material, and the algorithm, this is when they started really using that term, and they were like, we've really noticed that people gravitate when people open with personal stuff. And I was like, Robbie, I'm telling you, I fucking murdered on the first show. Why are you using it? And they forced me to use the second show. And to this day, when people watch that fucking Netflix stand-ups, I get tweets and DMs from people that are like, I don't care if that audience didn't like you. I thought you were funny. And you're like, yeah,
Dude,
that's not the point of a special, dude.
it never goes away. Whether it's on television or even on social media or just live when your friends see you, those conversations, those tweets, those comments, they never go away.
But here's the thing. Those people that are tweeting about the stand-ups, they're not wrong. They're like, I almost want to be like, give me a fucking Zack Snyder cut. Let me release the first show. Like, let me put out what really should have been put out, because it soured me on it, because this was my opportunity to showcase on Netflix, and you made me put up a set where the audience wasn't even really into it. So it just kind of was like, man, and that's why I was really lucky and very grateful that they let me out of my contract so I could do my HBO special. Because I didn't know.
Yeah. Dude, I didn't know that was the backstory behind all that.
Yeah, it just sucked. And like, now HBO barely does specials, so I can't go back there, and so now it's looking like YouTube in 2024.
I mean, everything's YouTube now. Not everything, but I feel like 90%.
Well, Netflix is doing those leasing deals where they're not even paying people real money. They're giving them like a fixed amount, and then they're holding their special for a year or two. Because they blew their load because they were giving Amy Schumer $19 million a special.
This podcast is sponsored by Jackson Creative, a custom communication agency located in downtown Hickory, North Carolina, specializing in online content creation. To learn more, visit thejacksoncreative.com. Jackson Creative, we tell your story.
So this podcast is called I Guess I'll Do It, and I pretty much talk to every comedian and guest about when they first dove into comedy with their, like, I guess I'll do it moment. So going back even before you were doing stand-up, what was your interest in comedy?
From the time I can remember.
Yeah.
When I was very little, my dad loved Rodney Dangerfield, so we used to watch those HBO Rodney Dangerfield specials.
To this day, they hold up, and they still make me genuinely laugh out loud.
I don't know what it was about it, but my dad felt like it was appropriate for me to watch stand-up from a very young age. Very young age. I was and I was, he was a horrible father, but the one thing I was real glad that he did was SNL and stand-up were like no language restrictions. Like, yeah, you can watch it, and I loved Robin Williams when I was really little because he was so silly, and then I kind of matured, and by the time I was like 10, I loved Dana Carvey, specifically his special Critics' Choice from 1994 and 1995.
Was that Choppin' Broccoli and Frame OJ? Yep.
That was Frame OJ. That was Adopt an Old Man is like having OJ. A kid. Frame. You know what my fiance and I say all the time is we go, judicial system. The judicial system.
I went to a very small grade school. There were 8 boys in the class, but I remember it was either 4th, 5th, or 6th grade. All of us would just say Frame OJ and Choppin' Broccoli and bing.
Yeah.
For years.
Buy me. When I was little, I used to go to Toys R Us and go, buy me that useless piece of plastic. But you already have that one. No, I have Megatron. That's Mega T. You can tell because this index finger is slightly bent.
Dude, I should go back and rewatch that one.
We did. When I stopped doing the bonfire in March, I kind of realized that for the past 8 years, most of the intake I've had has been criticizing and shitting on stuff and not really like
enjoying it.
Yeah. And so I was like, what do I enjoy? And I was like, I haven't watched Critics' Choice in forever. And I think Katie and I, we were somewhere. I think we were on the road, and we found it on YouTube and watched the whole thing. Loved it.
Oh.
Loved it.
That's so awesome that you still loved it. Like, sometimes when you go back and watch older sitcoms, you're like, it doesn't hold up like it did the way. But an old stand-up special like that, still holding its weight, sounds.
That David Spade's Take the Hit was real big. But the one that did it for me, the one that, like, if I were to say there was a moment that crystallized me being like, I want to be a stand-up comedian, was Dave Chappelle's Killing 'Em Softly when I was 16. It came out, and I was like, oh, I want to do that. because I knew I wanted to do stand up. I think I
Okay, so
probably
you kind of already really did have the seed in the back of your mind.
yeah, I was really bad at school. It was like a tall kid sniffing out basketball. I had a home life that was chaotic. I was bad at school, but I was really good at making everyone laugh. I was always able to break the tension with humor, and I loved stand up. Like I would watch Comedy Central at just always. That's what people don't realize now is Comedy Central when we were kids
Monumental.
stand up. They played stand up nonstop. You got to watch Premium Blends. You got to watch Comedy Central Presents. You got to watch all this stuff. And through high school and even into college, Comedy Central was my go-to channel. They would rerun Conan's. They would rerun late nights. They would show stand-up specials that I'd never seen before.
They would show the best SNL from the 90s episodes
Yep.
during the day after school.
It was unbelievable. I remember where I was. I was in college in Tucson when Lorne Michaels stopped using Comedy Central. The deal with Comedy Central ran up, and he signed with E, and so SNL moved to E.
I totally remember this.
I was like, "This is weird." It's like on E, but then because of that, I got into Howard Stern because I didn't have Howard Stern in Denver. And I was in college and they started playing the Howard Stern TV. And I was like, oh, this fucking rules.
Mm-hmm.
And so
he was on after 10:30 p.m.
Yeah. And I got into, because of share sites like, not LimeWire, but like Kazaa and like all the Morpheus.
Napster, LimeWire, all that stuff.
Was a big one. I got into Opie and Anthony. And that's where I got into like Bill Burr and Dave Attell. Obviously, Insomniac helped, but Colin Quinn, and then through Tough Crowd, really was like, I would probably say that was really where I was like, okay, I'm starting to feel like I need to move to New York to do stand up. Like LA was never an option for me. It was always like all the guys I really, really liked, Bill Burr, Nick DiPaolo, Patrice O'Neill, Colin Quinn, Jim Norton, Bobby Kelly, they were all like, I want to move. I want to go there. Like I want to go to, and then I started learning about the Cellar. And then I would say the thing that really got me to be like, besides Chappelle's special, was my friend Zach for my 17th birthday bought me Comedian on DVD, the documentary about Seinfeld returning to stand up in the year 2000.
The Orny Adams classic.
Yeah. And I've watched that over 200 times. You know, I usually do a rewatching once a year because to me, it's a moment where I can like really be like, that's awesome. Like, oh, I know what table at the Cellar that is. I know where they're standing at Stand Up New York, you know?
You and I are 100% exactly the same because everything you just said there, every show you just named, every person you just named, Tough Crowd, I was 100% in the same boat with all of that. Like, Comedy Central was so monumental then, and I loved the Presents and the Premium Blend. I first discovered Dane Cook and Mitch Hedberg because of Premium Blend before they even had their half hour.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching like Nick DiPaolo's half hour,
the one with the mannequins behind them.
Yeah, and then Patrice and the Pepsi can rapist. I remember seeing Patrice. There's an episode of Premium Blend where the lineup is Patrice, Gary Goldman, and Lisa Lampanelli. Like that's the three. I think she's the woman on there. But I know it's Patrice and Goldman. And you're like, what the fuck? You're like, look at that lineup. That's insane. And then I just really got into it, and I really started getting into, you know, this is the early days of like people putting shit online and kind of finding that stuff out. And man, I got real into it. And so when I was in college in Tucson, I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do an open mic. And I did an open mic and it went well.
How old were you? Were you still a teenager?
I was 20. I was 20 years old because I was drinking with a fake ID because I was drinking beers on stage and I was 20. And then I remember
a lot of risky things.
Yeah. And then I remember I came back and started bombing. And then I was like, this is horrible. This is horrible. And
so that first set did go well, though.
Yeah. And I was like, this is great.
I bring this up every podcast because it's the topic of discussion. So I apologize to the people that have heard me say this a million times, but all the guests don't know, I did great my first 2 sets, and then I bombed my next like 12 to 15. Like it was
almost
months
exactly the same.
and months and months until I had a good set again.
I was bombing so bad, and I had got a job at a radio station when I was 19. That was like my safety school. Was like, okay, if I'm not funny enough to be a stand-up comic, I'm gonna work in radio because I love music. I'm not a musician, so I can work in radio. And I worked at KFMA in Tucson, and there was a morning show there called The Frank Show. And the number 2 guy, like the second chair, was Frank's best friend, Dave Ashley, who's passed away, but he was a comedian and really funny. I think he was from Florida. He's from the South. And his wife, Beth, worked at Laughs. And occasionally I still get Facebook messages from Beth. But Dave, I asked Dave, I was like, I've been doing open mics, dude, and I'm bombing. And he was like, are you writing jokes? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, like you're going up there with like, are you preparing? And I was like, no, I like go up there and I like talk about what's annoying me. And he's like, yeah, it's not stand up, dude. He's like, you got to prepare. You got to like write jokes. And I was like, oh, I felt like such an idiot because I'd been such a fan of stand-up comedy and I knew what jokes were. I knew people had bits and I knew like the terms, but I guess I didn't really know the like actual application.
The specifics behind it.
I didn't know how to act. No one sat me down and was like, you write these jokes out, premise, setup, punch. There's rules of 3. Like I learned all that and it turned around. But I always remember Dave Ashley being like, are you preparing? And I was like, no.
Do you remember anything you did during that first set?
Yeah, I remember making fun of my friends watching ESPN, thinking they knew more about the sport than the athlete. Because I remember my friends being like, well, he should have done. I remember specifically it was when people are like, how did he not get 2 feet in bounds? And I'm like, you can't even get up off the couch without wheezing. I think that was like one of my lines I said that got a laugh. And I was like, okay, all right.
Okay.
And then I went on to write.
There's something here.
And then I went on to write the hackiest shit because Tucson's a road room, dude. It's a fucking road room. And so I remember I got up to the point where Scotty Goff, the owner of at the time of the comedy club, was like letting me co-feature. This is after about 2 years of me doing mics and like emceeing and stuff. I did 2 years of comedy in Tucson. And
is there a big scene there?
No, it was not when I was up there.
I didn't think so because I never really hear about that scene.
I still stay in touch with like specifically 2 of my friends from that scene, Jesse Campbell, who's a hilarious comic out of Minneapolis, and my buddy Matt Lamparzik, who ended up becoming a Navy diver. He's like it's crazy. And what's fun about Lamparzik is he lives in Connecticut. Whenever I'm in New England, he'll come out to my shows and I'll throw him guest sets. And it's so fun. It's so fun. We were at New York Comedy Club in Stamford and he came out and did guest sets on the Saturday show. And it was so fucking cool to be like, yeah, dude, go do a guest set. It was like a sold out show. And you're like,
that is cool. Does he still perform much or does he just do this when you come through?
He does mics. He does mics sometimes, but you know, he's like in the Navy. He's got 2 kids and you know, he's got a life. So he does stand up, but sparingly.
Yeah.
It's fun to kind of throw it back to those Tucson days and be like, fucking go up, dude. Because he's funny. He's such a funny guy.
That's so cool. That is so cool.
Yeah. It's so that's really fun. But when I moved to New York, it was an immediate like, oh fuck, I'm a hack. Like, oh fuck.
Starting from ground zero, no pun intended, but yeah. It's right in the rubble of the World Trade. But I completely rebooted when I came out here. I was like, I gotta learn how to write like good, fun jokes. And I was lucky because when I moved out here, my first friends were Joe List, Dan St. Germain, and Mike Lawrence, who were like 3 of the best joke writers in comedy. So it was like fun to go from mic to mic with them and kind of watch what they did and be like, oh, okay, I've got to like, you know, be original, but also you got to step your game up to match your peers.
Yeah,
which does
exactly.
wonders. I was actually going to go see Joe List tonight. He's down at the Portland Helium, and
He is.
I
Oh
didn't.
man, he's gonna rip Portland Helium.
I know, and I was going to go down tonight and hang. I asked if I could do a guest set with him, but I didn't realize it was 3 hours away. I thought I was like less than 90 minutes. Like, no, it's a hike. So I just texted Joe before you popped on and said I'm not coming down.
That's so funny because we were just texting about how good Big Lebowski is. He's on the plane right now watching Big Lebowski, and we were just texting about how funny it is. We were just saying that Walter Sobchak is pound for pound the best Coen brother character of all time.
Absolutely phenomenal movie. And my buddy, I'm really tight with Dom Herrera, who's from Philly.
I love Dom Herrera,
Dom
a.k.a.
is the limo
the
driver.
LA Colin Quinn. You what?
Dom is the limo driver in Lebowski.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Holy shit, I forgot about that.
And he's doing his own material as the limo driver. Yep.
Yeah, he was
I always thought that was so cool. He got his own stand-up in the movie. That's an actual bit of his.
Yeah, Dom Herrera is a guy that, like, I'm friends with all, like, I would say, like, Boston and Philly were the two cities where I made the most friends that they were from. Whether it be Joe List, Dan Bolger, all those guys from Boston, and then Philly with Big J, DeRosa, Vecchione, and then later on Metzger, but then later on Shane Gillis, Tommy Pope, all those guys, John McKeever. It was cool to see. Boston. When I first moved to New York, Boston was the city that all the fucking killers were coming out of. Shane Moss, like all these guys were coming out of Boston at such a clip that you're like, Jesus Christ, it's a factory. And then now it's switched to Philly. So I think that's
a lot of great comedy in Philly, man. A lot.
And you were a guy that I met in Philly that I was like, holy shit! I forgot who I remember seeing you feature for somebody. I forget who you were featuring for. Not Brewer. It might have been Brewer. I forget who it was.
Segura?
You were featuring for some. I don't think so. It was somebody that I was like, Jesus Christ, Pat House is a fucking killer. And then you were up here for a little bit, and I remember being like, oh, dude, it's kind of fun to go through that journey of like watching,
It really is. And I love getting guys like you on to talk about our early days, because the guys you just mentioned were monumental to me when I first started, because Big J was the first. I think I was the first person he took under his wing. Yeah. Like, I remember Jay featuring or performing at my college, and he was still the opener. And I introduced myself, and I was like, hey man, I want to start doing stand-up. He told me to go to the Laugh House and who to talk to. And I went a week later, and he gave me his first email address, bigjay@hotmail.com. I think it's defunct. Great. And we kept in touch. And 6 months later, he came back to headline Rascals in Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Yeah, shout out that Red Robin in Cherry Hill.
Yup. He gave me guest sets all weekend. And then Big J would give me guest sets every time he came through. And he would bring DeRosa to feature, or Nate. There were so many nights at Rascals. It was me, Jay, Nate, Metzger, Vecchione, DeRosa, any rotation of those guys. And I think of those days often.
And you know what's weird is at that same time, I had moved to New York, and I was kind of working my way up out of the open mic scene. The Creek was really starting to pop off. So that was like kind of our home club in Queens, where like we could just go and absolutely fuck around. Like me, Norman, List, Giannis, Nate, all those guys. We could just go and fucking Nick Turner. There's like Nick Vatterott. There's just like a bunch of guys that were going that you could Scoville, Jesse Pop, like all those guys.
Yep. And then all those guys are phenomenal.
And then Big J, at the time, Wayne Rada was booking Stand Up New York. And it was like Fridays and Saturdays. You just go up there and it'd be like Big J. That's how I met the Skanks. That's how I met Lewis and Dave and Jay, and I started doing poster dog comedy up there. That's how I became friends with Nate and Justin Silver and just all these people that are, that I've known for so long. And it was like, and I try to explain to people that when Jay and I did the bonfire, I'm like, I'm little brother, dude. Don't forget that. Like, this is, I'm always, in my mind, I'm always Big J's opener, because like he took me on the road and it was like, oh, this is awesome. And then we started doing a Sirius XM show, and it was like, this is crazy. This is crazy to do this show. And it lasted, they're still going. Big J and Bobby are going.
Bobby, yeah.
Which is great because Bobby was the one that took Big J on the road. So it's like this, and then Bobby took me on the road. So it was very fun.
That's awesome. I love hearing about who got help from other people. Like way back when, my first two big experiences on the road. One came from Segura, one came from Sebastian. And both
Yeah.
of them obviously blew up like crazy. But man, for, I don't know, a couple years there, a good 3 or 4 years, I was opening for them a lot. I got to see the country. I got to do different crowds. I got to perform in front of 7,000 people. Like
Crazy.
really dig your teeth in. And it's awesome to hear because comedy is such a small world. And it's like the most helpful community, man. Everybody who's not a dickhead really helps everybody.
Yeah, I think it's like because you don't. This is a business of ups and downs, and I think a lot of people, the people that know that, kind of go out of their way to help people because you're like, man, you don't know where you're going to be in 10 years. You don't know where you're going to be in 2 years. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I mean, I remember seeing Shane emceed for me at Helium for New Year's in Philly. And immediately we hit it off on the Thursday show. And I had Madden. I brought my PlayStation and I was like, well, I'm going to go back and play Madden. And he was like, dude, I love Madden. And I was like, oh, grab some beers from the club, come back to the room. I'll smoke weed and we can play Madden. And we ended up playing Madden all night. And then it was like randomly, I was like, oh, I ran out of weed. And he's like, well, my buddy makes his own edibles. And Matt McCusker came over and gave me edibles at the hotel. And then it's like crazy now. I just did Matt and Shane's podcast last week and it's like the #1 podcast on Patreon. And you're like, dude, I remember McCusker bringing me homemade edibles on a fucking Thursday.
Helium in Philly is my home club, and then a couple years ago we got a second club, the Punchline. And opening week of the Punchline, DeRosa headlined, I was in the middle, and Shane was the MC.
Crazy.
It's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
And now Shane is like selling theaters like it's comedy club tickets. It's fucking awesome. I love it.
It's wild. I just listened to him, speaking to two people you mentioned earlier, on my flight yesterday. I listened to Shane on Dana Carvey and David Spade's podcast.
Oh my God, that's great. I saw that he was on there.
Really good episode. Really, really good episode.
Yeah, I saw the clip when they were talking about Norm, but I haven't got to listen to the full thing. I love that. That's so cool. It's just, it's real fun to see in comedy, kind of like your friends. Like I remember Segura, I haven't hung out with him much, but I met him in 2012 at Montreal, and we went and got a Starbucks together and just sat outside and had a coffee and bullshitted for a little bit. And then next thing I know, he's like doing arenas. I mean, look at Nate Bargatze. Nate, you're talking about Nate opening for Jay, and then now Nate's like doing venues where you're like, I saw in Salt Lake, he's doing the arena like 4 shows or some shit.
That's so awesome. So I was was at the Greenville Comedy Zone in South Carolina 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And Nate was literally at the arena across the street. And
so
it was
funny.
Just crazy that our show, I don't know, 150 people. And then there was just lines 3 blocks down the street for Nate directly in front of our show.
It's always so funny when you're going to a club show and you pass, like, I remember I was doing, speaking of Salt Lake, I was doing Wise Guys. And
great club.
Love that club.
Keith is one of the best guys in comedy, too.
Keith rules. And Keith enjoys comedy on a level that you're like, oh, you actually do like it. Like, he watches the shows and he's like, oh, I fucking love that bit. And you're like, oh, hell yeah. That was very fun. But I remember I was doing Wise Guys and I was walking to the club. The hotel's across the street from the arena. And Gabriel Iglesias was playing the arena. And it was like mayhem outside. And then I walk over to the club and it was like a Thursday. And it was like half sold. And then everyone's like, hey, how you doing? And then you're like, it's so weird that a block away, everyone's feverish for comedy. And here they're like, hey, the headliner showed up.
That hotel in Salt Lake City, you look out, it's directly out your window. It is directly right there. The arena's right there. So I love talking to my guests about, I don't want to dwell on the negative, but I love a good horror story. What's the first show that comes to mind when you think of an absolute fucking nightmare show you've had?
Oh, I remember a show. I used to do shows. Soul Joel, Joel Richardson owns, Soul Joel's in Pennsylvania. He had the outside dome or whatever. But back about 12 or 13 years ago, he would book one-nighters. And
I've done a million of them for him. I've known him just as long as I've been doing stand-up. I've known him for almost 20 years. So
a bad Soul Joel show that's a tough go. That's a real tough go.
I've had my handful.
And I remember we were in Connecticut and it was me and Reese Waters were co-headlining and at this pub, and we showed up and there were 5 people in the room there was a bartender, 2 guys at the bar, and then the sound guy named Birdie, and like one other person. And I was like, well, no show, I guess, huh? And Joel's like, no, we're going to do a show. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, we'll do a show. I was like, dude, I'm supposed to do 40. I think Reese and I were supposed to split, each do 40 minutes. I was like, dude, I'm not doing 40 minutes. And he was like, no, do like 30. I was like, what? There's 5 people. And I did my set and no one was listening. The guys at the bar didn't even turn around. Bartender was talking to them. I ended up just having a 30-minute conversation with the sound guy, trying to do a bit. It would fail, going back, and you're like, it just feels like you're just standing there and you're like, all right, hit me. And then they hit you and you're like, okay, hit me again. And you're like, am I done? And they're like, no, you got to keep going. You're like, all right, hit me again. Oh, fuck. And you're just taking beatings.
That's such a great analogy. This wasn't a Soul Joel show, but I did a show one time in Delaware for Gino Bisconti, and the crowd.
I've opened for Gino before in Delaware too.
Well, yeah, he's from there. This crowd there was people there, but they weren't paying attention. They were chatty and they were overtaking the show. I swear to you, I'm not exaggerating. My mom called me and I took the phone call on stage and nobody even noticed or cared. And I remember thinking, this is so painfully bad. It's hilarious. I'm talking to my mother on the phone on stage and nobody in the crowd remotely gives a shit. And then I put the phone back in my pocket and had to do 15 more minutes to nobody.
It's just brutal when you're bombing and you're like, all right. And then when no one cares and you're like, can this be over? There's nothing better than there's not a better feeling than a bad show ending. Where you're like, okay, that's done. It's just done.
Last night I had a fun show. I had 30 people in the crowd and they were a very polite 30. They just weren't super uproarious, but they were nice. And I swear to God, I was over the moon elated when I hit 40 and I was like, 5 minutes.
How good does it feel when that light clicks on and you're like, I try to explain to people that aren't in comedy. For us, the Friday afternoon of Here Comes the Weekend is Saturday late show. When you get that light and you're like, we're done, baby. What is it? I go home and I love coming home now that I'm engaged and I got a dog and like I have a great home life. It's like returning home is like better than a bag of money. You're like, I just get to fucking go back to my awesome fiance and my sweet little pup. And that light hits and you're like, sweet grace. I feel like Kevin Costner at the beginning of Robin Hood where he kisses the sand when he gets back to England.
On the flip side of a Hell Gig, tell me about their Fully Loaded tour. Because that just looked great, like man. The absolute funnest thing on the entire planet.
You know, I think we do all these gigs. You do all these like really shitty gigs and you really sometimes have to grit it out. And then you get to go on something like that, and legitimately Bert and his team made all of us feel like rock stars. And I hate that term. I fucking hate that term.
I don't like it either. It's so cheesy to tie into stand-up. But knowing what the
I genuinely
tour
mean,
is like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
You're on a tour bus. You pull into the city. You hang out all day. You do something fun, and then it's like an arena full of people, and you're doing stand-up, and you're like, this is incredible. You're like, this is just incredible. This is so much fun. This is like, you want to be like, I wish I had this feeling every night. It was just the way you're treated. You know what I mean? And like, it was very, very fun. It was tiring. It was a lot, you know, like Jay did all 4 weeks and I was really impressed with that. Bert doing all 4 weeks too, because I did one weekend and I was like, man, that was, it was fun. A lot. It was fun, but it was a lot.
Who was on your week with you?
It was me, Big J. The ones that were on every show were me, Big J, Tiffany Haddish, and Bert Kreischer. But then we had Dave Attell and Shane was on the New York show. Shane Torres, Rosebud Baker, and Shane Gillis were on the New York show. And then the rest of the weekend, it was like me, Attell, Big J, Tiffany, Tammy Pascatelli was on every show, and Bert. And so we got a good little group going.
Those
And,
lineups are absolutely out of this universe.
yeah, and then they added Jim Norton. Attell couldn't do Friday and Saturday, so he couldn't do Saturday, Sunday, so we got Jim Norton, and Jim's one of my favorite comedians of all time. So it was like having you're like bummed that I can't watch Attell, and then it's like, oh no, but it's Norton. Oh, awesome, okay.
Dude,
so it was just like, as a comedy fan, you're like, oh fuck this.
Dude, as a comedy fan, when I was brand new into stand up, he just released Yellow Discipline, and I analyzed that like a Beatles record. I would listen to it over and over and over again and analyze the jokes. What was funny about this? That was a callback. Oh,
one of the most surreal moments of my life. There's, I've been lucky to have a lot of surreal moments, but I think one of the craziest ones was, I knew I had told Jay that I was leaving the bonfire, and I was like getting ready. The fans didn't know, we told the fans like 2 weeks before I left, because we just wanted to do the show as regular as possible without people overanalyzing it. And I was at the cellar and I was talking to Jim, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to leave the bonfire. And we had this like long conversation about radio and the fans and how much they care about it and what it's like and doing all this shit. And there's this moment where I'm like, I'm talking about fucking Sirius XM with Jim Norton, like a guy that I listened to on Opie and Anthony for years. And it's like, it was just surreal. I was like,
dude, there's no better mentor in that regard for that, for you in that situation.
And him being like, him telling me like, no. I think, when we talked about it, he's like, it seems like you're leaving for the right reasons. It seems like this is all fucking great. And I was like, dude, this is so fucking crazy to talk about this with Jim Norton.
Dude, there are still moments in my career where like I get starstruck by very few comedians. I've met so many of my heroes. I've done a lot of cool shit.
Yeah.
But like I could still have a conversation with Dave Attell or Brian Regan, and I am almost speechless. And I know both of them. Both of them. But I was so obsessed with Insomniac and Attell's early stand-up. And then Brian Regan, his first album and his Presents, oh my God, I have them both memorized. I still look at them and like my jaw hits the floor. Still.
I feel that way about Colin Quinn. Whenever I get to
He's on that list too.
I'm like, my God, dude, you're one of the best. One time I opened for Colin and we were driving. It was a very, very long drive, and he could kind of feel my excitement, I was playing it cool. He was working on Unconstitutional. That's what he was working on. And we were driving to this gig, and I remember he had this legal pad, he's like writing his notes or whatever. And he's like going over them. And finally he puts the notepad on the dashboard of the van that I was driving. And he goes, all right, ask me your comedy questions. And it was like, like I just was machine gunning him. I was like, what was it like? You started with Rock and Sandler in '84. What was that like? And it had him laughing because he was like, God damn, you young comics know everything about comedy.
It's so true,
like,
man.
Yeah, we do.
You are one of the better conversations I've had with that regard, because not everybody feels the same way, even though they're comedians, the same way you and I do about it, or have the same appreciation for the nuances. And
I love this shit, dude.
I absolutely love this shit. I have opened for Colin a bunch of times. I saw Colin Quinn. I seen a beer get thrown on him at the Electric Factory in Philadelphia. A guy ran up the middle row and launched this beer right at him.
Why?
It was for Kid Chris. It was an Opie and Anthony type crowd. They were animals. It was me, Rich, Bonnie, Bob Levy. I got booed 2 minutes in by 2,000 people.
Oh, fuck that!
And then I haven't thought of this in forever. I forgot about this. I did a show at Helium. I forget what it was called. It was a black show that was on occasional Sundays. And it was me, Colin Quinn, Kevin Hart, and Tony Rock. And I fucking ate shit so bad in front of Colin Quinn and Kevin Hart.
I see that.
They wanted people that ran the show, wanted the comics to be walked out on stage in the middle of two like sexy ladies in dresses. And me and Colin were both like, we're not doing that. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, come on, it's funny. It's sexy. I'm like, we're not. Look at us. We're not doing that.
White guys can't be cool. And you can't be a cool white guy in comedy.
And Kevin Hart was getting famous, but he wasn't what he is now. And I remember walking in the green room and being like, this is so embarrassing.
Yeah, dude. It is.
And then that's another thing. You meet your heroes, you work with them, you bomb in front of them.
Dude. So I used to do this when I moved to New York and I was doing mics. Like I said, I would always go hang out at Stand Up New York because I found out I could do the check spots up there. That was like kind of the hack that I found, where I was like, okay, if I go up, I can do check spots and I'll get actual stage time. It is just the first 3 minutes are going to be fucking brutal because everyone's paying their check. But they'll give me like a 10-minute spot, and like the first 3 minutes, if I can sustain that, I can get jokes off by the end. And I really did learn how to like read a crowd and like see who's responding, who to play to, how you can get a portion of the audience listening, and that will spread to the other side, you know? So it's very valuable, but I bombed a lot. And I remember specifically Big J was putting out his Comedy Central Presents, and Wayne Rada, who's booking it, was kind of managing Jay at the time.
Mm-hmm. I remember Wayne.
So it was, yeah, Wayne rules. I still text with Wayne sometimes.
Nice.
There was so he made it a whole night. So the lineup was like, I remember it was a Friday night, and I remember the big deal was Nate Bargatze was going to get spots. He wasn't getting guest spots. Like Nate was going to get spots, and Justin Silver was hosting, and Leah Bonomo was on it, and it was like Kurt Metzger and me and it was DeRosa, Kurt, and Jay and Patrice. Patrice was closing out the shows, and I remember the first check spot, the 8 o'clock, went pretty good. It went well enough that I got fucked up because I didn't think I was doing it. I wasn't doing the 10 o'clock. I was like smoking weed downstairs with Jay and all them and like Lewis. And I was like, man, this fucking rules. This is fucking the best. And I was like, I was getting high, drinking Budweisers and shit. And then Justin Silver walks up to me and goes, hey, we don't have anybody for the 10 o'clock check spot. Do you want to go? And I was still in that mindset of like, never say no to a set. Never say no to stage time. Foolishly.
That's ingrained in you when you first start.
Exactly. And I try to explain that to people, that it's Pavlovian to be like, you have to get on stage if you are offered an opportunity. So I remember they were like, do you want to do the check spot? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I fucking bombed. I bombed so hard, Pat. And I remember at one point I could feel the flop sweat coming. And this is like a 10-minute set. And I'm like bombing. And I look to the right of Stand Up New York where the exit door was. And Patrice is sitting on a chair with his hat on his knee, just watching me absolutely fucking bomb. And I remember I got off stage and I didn't say anything to anybody. And I walked outside and I lit a cigarette and I called the girl I was dating at the time. And I was like, I think I want to quit stand up. I was like, I think I went from such a high to such a low. And then she was like, no, they probably didn't even notice you bomb. Go back in there. And so I go back in there and it's like the end of the show and Jay's special's airing. And I got a Budweiser from the bar and I sat down to watch the special and my knee hit the table and I knocked the beer over and it spilled into Kurt Metzger's girlfriend's lap and into Kurt's lap. And Kurt was like, what the fuck? This fucking guy? And I was like, oh, God damn it. Oh, God. It was like salt in the wound.
Yeah, but these stories are my favorite.
Oh my God, dude, it was brutal. Even telling you that, I'm getting like that, like,
man.
I remember being mortified.
Oh, but these are the stories that keep me coming back, though. I mean, I know my friends are out there on the road killing it. Please tell me about the show that did not go well.
Yeah, dude, that's it.
All right, dude, I'm going to let you go, man. Dude, thank you so much for hopping on here for an hour. I really appreciate it. It was great to catch up, and it was great to talk shop with you because these are the conversations I can have 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I love it, dude. I love it. And it's weird when you talk to comics that aren't into comedy like this, and you're like,
it is so weird to me. It is so love this shit. Yeah. It really blows my mind that, like, you're either crazy obsessed like we are, or you're like a full working comic who just like has one foot out, not out the door, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I had a friend
That was a horrible analogy. I don't know where I was going with that.
No, but I was gonna talk over it. There was there was a person that I know that works in comedy that told me, somebody that I've known for a while. They were like, he hates doing stand up, and I was like, then why do it? It's so painful. Why do it? Go do something you enjoy.
I can't imagine. I mean, maybe if I hate it one day, okay, I'll let however it pans out.
Sure.
But why would you keep doing it?
Yeah, it's brutal. That's almost worse. If you hate it and keep doing it, that's like a form of torture.
Absolutely. Self-inflicted.
Yeah, no way. I fucking love this shit. And it was great catching up with you, dude, and talking.
Thanks, man. All right, dude. Dan Soder is on tour everywhere. His calendar is always nuts and jam-packed. Go check him out on tour. When are you coming through Philly next?
Oh my God. I actually am doing my first theater in Philly in December. I'm going to be at the Fillmore.
At the Fillmore. Nice.
December 16th. I will be at the Fillmore in Philly.
I will be there because I am 100% in town that weekend because I'm out of town the 2 weekends before.
Then you're doing a goddamn guest set, Pat House.
All right.
Come do a set.
I will gladly take it.
Since we're talking about all the bad times, let's have some good times.
I just did the Fillmore with Dan Cummins back in March, and it was great fun, man. He packed out 2 shows. I think someone died on the first show, but
really?
Oh yeah, we had to stop the show. Dan had to stop. They had to turn all the house lights on. Medics came in. I saw them doing chest compressions, and the dude was not moving.
Well, come to my show December 16th in Philly. And don't die. And then
December 16th. I'll put it in my phone right now, dude.
Hell yeah, dude. Thanks, buddy.
All right, dude. Thank you so much, Dan Soder. Everybody, thank you.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.